Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Jason.
With me today is life coach and LOA teacher Joel Elston.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
And I'm just going to start off by saying I want to make something clear. This show is not a scam. I mentioned that because Joel and I were just talking about scams, and I thought I'd get that out up front, so that there's no, we're not asking for money. We're not going to try to get you to invest in anything. We're just here to chew the fat over stuff that we think is important, that listeners think is important too. So, but I just want to get that out there up front.
we might need a disclaimer every week. Just say that every week.
Yeah. Well, we were just talking about the different kinds of scams that are out there before we got started here. And you made a really interesting point. You said you go into every situation assuming it's a scam until proven otherwise. That's a really smart way of going about doing it, because that way you're always eyes open.
Sure. And knowing human nature and knowing greed and knowing how things work. And I was very susceptible to scams for a long time because my situation was dire. So when people are in need of a miracle, there's always people offering scams that seem to be miracles, and you got to be very aware of that. And it's like families that are trying to adopt children, and these adoption agencies, these private adoption agencies, want to charge thousands and thousands of dollars, and it's like, we can get adopted for free. You don't need to do that, but there's just it's a bizarre world. So it's not a negative thing, but just sort of anticipate. Let's always sort of assume it is a scam until you know otherwise.
Well, now that we've established that we're not a scam, let's get some news, because you've been down into Florida visiting your favorite bench that you wrote a book based on. And I know every time you go to visit your bench, you have a new story that comes out of it. I'm really curious to know what the new story is.
This is going to be a minor shocker for you. So I'll sort of explain. I'll lead up to it. So
okay.
The trip went very well. We fly from Richmond to Orlando, and then we drive down to the island because my hometown's sort of in between those two things. So I like to stop and see people in my local hometown. And I do not like to change planes. So Richmond to Orlando is a direct flight, and Richmond to Tampa you have to change planes in Atlanta. So I hate changing planes. So it kills two birds with one stone. But for a long time, that made a lot of sense. But traffic in Orlando now is it's outrageous. So
absolutely.
Florida has it's just everybody's in Florida. It's terrible traffic no matter what time you arrive. And some of this sounds like I'm complaining and negative, and there'll be a point to that. But so
I'll second my brother lives in Orlando. He and his wife live in Orlando, and so the last time I visited him was actually 2 months before the pandemic started, and I can attest that traffic is crazy. I think probably half the people there should probably be institutionalized, and it's not only crazy. I mean, we actually you and I had a conversation a few weeks back about how the traffic is north of Richmond on I-95, and that traffic is really, really bad. Orlando is like that traffic 24/7.
It is. And, I heard this statement the other day when I was down there. The guy said, "You know how far Orlando is from Orlando?" And he goes, "An hour." He said, he said, you can't go anywhere that's not an hour. And the only equivalent traffic would be sort of Los Angeles, Santa Monica, that area out there. Same thing. If you want to go a mile, it takes you an hour sometimes. So traffic in Florida was terrible. We were a little late getting delayed down there. We made it down to the island. We landed late Sunday. We stayed at a hotel. We went down to the island on Monday. It was, I've been hearing how hot it was. Everybody I know in Florida is telling me how hot it's been. I grew up in Florida, so I just assumed that was your typical sort of overreaction type thing. But it is significantly hotter in Florida right now than it was when I was a kid. The temperatures aren't, but the almost 100% humidity, very little breeze. So there were days it was feeling like 113 degrees. So so it was very hot. And my little island, Anna Maria Island, is where I found my recovery. It's where the bench exists. It's my favorite place on the planet. And I'm taking my son Justin down. He went with me, and we have this beautiful bayfront condo we were able to get hold of, and we stayed in a bayfront condo right across from the fishing pier. So we've had this great location. and back in the day, again, the island in August was dead. There was nobody on the island, and most of the kids were already back in school. The Northerners weren't there. The vacationers were gone, and the island was empty. Well, this trip, and now the island is always full. There's a 2.5 to 3 hour wait at most restaurants every night.
Wow.
There's traffic jams on this island. It's way overcrowded. It's been oversold. There used to be a bunch of really nice middle class homes. It was sort of people lived there year round. They've been replaced with these gigantic multi-million-dollar structures that most of them are listed on Airbnb. So it's a very transient population, and there's a point to all of this. The island is not the island I remember. It is,
right.
In fact, the first day there, I was like, it just felt not anxiety. It just felt like it wasn't comfortable like it used to be. It wasn't laid back. Now Justin, really nice, Justin was down there. He met a friend pretty early. And so he got to have a wonderful experience. He just was able to go all over the island. They did fishing, they rode jet skis. So his experience was really good this time. But from my perspective of what I love the island about, it just isn't the same island anymore. I think in 2014, the New York Times did an article. It was the secret location in Florida called Anna Maria Island, and it just sort of opened the door to all that big money coming down. It just changed the dynamic of the island. The property, Florida has an insurance problem. I don't know if you keep up with that, Walt, but people can't insure their homes because of the cost of it. It's just very expensive.
Okay.
So one of my neighbors down there, he has a home that's valued, and everything on the island is at least $1 million. There's nothing that isn't worth $1 million value.
Right.
His property insurance went, I think in 2015, it was like $4,000 a year. Then it went to like $10,000.
Wow.
And 2 years ago it was $27,000. And his latest quote was $55,000 a year.
Whoa.
So while that's not a tax, it is the cost of, if you can't afford to pay off your home, then your bank requires you to have homeowners insurance.
Right.
And when you're paying $55,000 a year mandatory, that's a form of a tax. So in my mind, at least for the cost of living. So Florida is a lot different than it used to be. And with all the crowds and all that. And of course, my bench is still there. The beaches are absolutely beautiful. And the reason that I'm telling you all of this, it's not me being negative on any level. I still love my island. But as I was sitting on the bench and just waiting, I don't have any, normally when I'm sitting on the bench, I'm looking for an epiphany, or there's a question I have about life. The original origins of me sitting on the bench is when I made a decision to start my recovery and turn my life around. That was a drastic thing. Before I adopted my children, I always sat on the bench and asked, was that the right thing to do? Anything that ever I made a change in my life, I always went to the bench looking for that guidance, so to speak. It was my spiritual place.
Sure.
And so as I was sitting on the bench, and it was on my anniversary, August 17th is, in 1995 is when I first sat on the bench. And so it was literally on the anniversary. And I had one of the most eye-opening moments, because again, I just wasn't in tune with my trip to the island. And it just came to me, the bench is not a place. The bench is an idea. The bench is the idea, the destination of you need to end back up on this island, because that's the thing, is a ridiculous idea. The bench is a concept. And it just, I had this awakening, because I've almost had this need to, at some point when Justin finished high school, I was always thinking I want to move back down there, and that's just sort of my destiny. But I don't love the island anymore. It's not, and it's not anything wrong with it. As far as, but I'm talking about for me, and it was almost like a relief, because I don't know where I'm going to end up. I know I'm going to end up near living on water. I know I'm going to do that. All that stuff's going to happen. But my idea that I was relieved from the need to, that is the place. I don't have to go back there. That's the the journey has been the point the entire time. The bench is a place that exists anywhere where I choose the bench to exist. It's a metaphorical experience, and that I don't know why that hit so hard this time, but it was really cool, and because I've always been the guy that the journey guy, not the destination guy. It's always I'm like, I don't really care where that destination is, but it's for the first time that I just was able to. I'm not saying I'm not going to go back and visit the bench, and I'm not saying I'm all that, but I am saying that I'm certainly not going to live there. I've determined that. It's just I don't like it there just because of all those factors, and it opened me up to I get stuck on one idea that returning to the bench at some point was the location of the bench where wherever I go, the bench is going to exist.
Yeah.
And that was big.
That's huge.
Yeah. I don't know why that struck me. It's something that I've always talked about, but in this one case, and so the positives of all my negatives that I felt about that was my emotional guidance scale that needed me to say, look, you keep forcing this to be the ultimate place. And it's not the same place that it was in 1995. It's not the same feeling. It's not the same. I'm not the same person I was in 1995. The idea that I rode jet skis, and get sunburned horribly, and I'm realizing, oh my gosh, I haven't been out in the sun for a year. So again, me and Florida and the bench and all that is just a whole different. I'm a different human being than I was,
right.
And that's such an awakening when you can realize that I carry the bench right here. I carry that inside of me. I carry that concept of the bench, and the bench can be right here in Virginia. It could be Smith Mountain Lake. I love that up in and that's a beautiful lake.
I love Smith Mountain Lake.
It's one of the most beautiful lakes in the country. I have a friend that has a place
lake for a year.
Yeah, that's gorgeous. I have a friend that has a place on Lake Lanier near Atlanta, outside of Gainesville, Georgia. That's another gorgeous place. And I'm thinking, all of a sudden, all these possibilities of where I could go opened up, and there was never that. So the bench trip this time was releasing me from the bench, if that makes any sense.
It makes total sense. In fact, I think what you're describing, the way I would say what you're describing is you have come to a bigger realization that in a very real way, you and your journey are the bench.
Yes.
The bench isn't a physical place. It's your journey.
Yes. And the reason that I like that is when I'm always talking to people, and when we are doing these things, we're ignoring the day-to-day where stuff happens. It isn't me ending up at the bench. It isn't you ending up on it's the everyday thing that's the point of life. Where we end up is a byproduct of all these other things, but enjoying life as it exists and being able to, let's speed this up. Let's just feel what's happening today. Enjoy today. Make every place your bench, and that's doable. Where I don't want a destination place, because I used to. Before I left, I said, I want to be recharged. Every time I mentally would go down to the bench, I thought I was going to be recharged. It felt like that was my recharging place. And I realized I was exhausted after I left the bench, and I actually said, I need to go home and recharge. And it's because the stress of travel, the stress of all those people, and again, traffic. It's like if you're just going up to the little grocery store. So it used to be about a 10-minute trip. Now it's like an hour round trip to go if you forgot something. And it's just all these conveniences and all the things that used to exist and what that island used to represent is not there for me anymore. And this is not about anybody else or how they feel. It's still a beautiful place and all that. But it felt so good because I haven't had a real strong message from the bench for years. The last time I really had a message when it was time for me to look at adopted Justin and make sure that was the right thing. And that was, that's where a portion of TJ's remains are at. And so the bench will always have that location will always have something for me. But the idea that the energy of the bench is really within me, not there. And it has so many other implications, and it sort of changed things, even though nothing has changed. It changed things for me in a really cool way because it was like a relief. It's like I don't have to go there. and
Yeah.
it's not a driven place anymore. It's not I don't have a deadline to be anywhere right now.
Right, right. I love that. That's really I don't know if you saw Howard in the live stream put up a comment. He says, "You're saying everything I'm feeling and going through." And I think anybody listening in can appreciate, they don't necessarily have to even have read your book, The Bench. They can just tell from what you're talking about exactly what you're talking about. It makes sense because
Yes.
we are all on our own journeys. We all have our benches, so to speak, our places that we go to in our minds or in our hearts or on our feet in order to find comfort, solace, meditation, relaxation, whatever it is. We all have one of those places. And what you just brought to everybody's attention is we bring those places with us. They aren't a place anymore. They're in our hearts.
Yeah. And that's the one of the families I work with. I work with a lot of ultra high net worth families, and the sort of the founder of this family, he's a very high driven man worth probably $3 or $4 billion. And we were having a discussion about his satisfaction with life. And he said, as I was building and growing in my 30s, we were struggling. In my 40s, we had some success. In my 50s, I became wealthy. In my 60s, I became fabulously wealthy. In my early 70s, I am one of the wealthiest people in the world. And he said, my happiest place was way back when I was building it. He said, the idea that I'm sitting in it, he said, when I had my goal was everything was going to be great when I had a net worth of $1 billion.
Yeah.
And he said, when I had a net worth of 50 million that I worked really hard for, and I was very satisfied, felt so much better than sitting there with whatever all this is and all these people. And it takes an entire army of people to do his taxes, and his kids are a mess. And he's like, I always assumed this destination was going to be the answer, but it's not. And
we all make that assumption. I think, well, I won't say all, but I would say a great number of us make that assumption.
Yes.
It's often about finances, but it doesn't have to be about that. It's something usually attached to financials or relationships or health or some variant of those. Once I get to that stage, everything's going to be great.
Yes.
And that's actually the illusion.
And exactly. And the law of attraction tells us, when you believe you have, when you feel as if you have, you'll get that. But it's not the attainment of it all. It's the feeling of, to me, what financial relief is, abundance for me is I don't have to worry about money. I don't have to worry about, am I going to pay my bills? I don't have to worry about electric. If I need something, I had this, we had, right before we went on vacation, Justin's car needed something, it was $1,000, and I got this for $1,000, and I had another $3,000. Like right before vacation, after paying for vacation, like $7,000. It's no big deal. It doesn't matter. So, not worrying about money is the gift, but the money itself is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. It doesn't. When you struggle with money for a long time, that there's a side of you that just becomes so obsessed with not having enough money. But once you realize the abundance of it all is the point. It's not a dollar amount, or I'm not ever going to be any happier because I get more money. Money's just gives me options, but it doesn't make me any happier at this point because I have an abundance now. And the idea that a destination or a relationship or an amount of money or a new car or a new couch or whatever you can put out there is somehow going to make you happy is really the big illusion that a lot of us pursue. Yeah. And then you get there, and like when I get to this place, that then all of a sudden I'll be happy, and that's not the case at all.
That's
and it really is
really important point. And we miss that, don't we? I mean, most of the time, because I know even now, as I think about some of the things I'm pursuing right now, I can tell there are some illusions I'm pursuing. Right. And it is like a reminder, like, okay, maybe you may want to double check. And is that really what you want to pursue? Is that really what you're after?
Yes.
It's a gut check.
And that it is. And so this trip was, again, this awakening this time was unexpected because as I sat on the bench and I can remember just feeling, on August, Thursday was August 17th. And as I was sitting there, I was, I'm thinking to myself, this has been maybe disappointing of a trip. I was trying to figure out what that emotion was. And I was trying to figure out what's going on with that. And not negative. I wasn't depressed. Right. It was just this little disappointed in all of this because the expectations of Anna Maria no longer exist. It doesn't.
Mm,
I'm wanting something from the island that's no longer there. It's a
yeah.
different place, but yet I'm still expecting it to, have. And also, there's another side to this that I mentioned earlier. Justin was able to have the childhood experience of the island that I did, where
Yeah.
it's the safest place in the world. They're running all over the island. He
Yeah.
actually has my credit card, so he's in far better place than I was as a kid. So he's charging us stuff all over the place. But they had a blast. He's swimming at these people's house. They're on the jet skis. They fish for my good friend took him out fishing. He literally fished probably for 15 hours one day.
Wow.
So he had that was my childhood on the island. And
Yeah.
so I'm glad that he got to see that. So the trip wasn't a loss.
And experience it. He didn't just see it;
Yeah.
he experienced it. Because
Yes.
we've been talking about how it's a journey. I mean, he was in the journey right in that moment.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
made it so beautiful.
Yeah, and when we're here, I need to know where you're at, what you're doing there. If you're on the island, you're good. I looked on. We have the Life 360 Outrange series out. He's like 6 miles away, way down the road, and I'm like, he's good. Yeah, it's just it's a safe place. And my parents literally let us run the island my entire childhood, and it was just it was a really wholesome experience.
Yeah.
Not all of it, but that's later.
Well, the childhood part was good.
Yeah, the childhood part. When I got 15, 16, I mean, we had some events that were pretty exciting too, but in a different category.
Different way, yes.
Yeah, but
for further details, read the bench.
Yeah, read the bench. But this idea for me, it was sort of the not that I had any stress or anxiety over it as much as there was this relief of I've missed this. My last few trips down here have not been what I thought they were. And I, next year I'm sure we're going to go down there and visit again. It's not going to be that, but my expectations are not going to be the same thing anymore about what I'm expecting from the island.
What do you think they will be next time? Do you have any semblance of an idea on that?
If anything, again, that's my son's remains or part of his remains are there. It would be anything just as a visit to him, just a tribute to him. And I have friends on the island. We'd stop there, and I have a little favorite place I eat, a little burger place there.
Okay.
And we'll still do all that, but I won't be going with the idea that my life needs to be recharged by being at this place and work, because it's not that place anymore. And I don't need to recharge. I have a great life up here. I have worked really hard to have the life I have up here. The people this is home now, and so I don't need to escape home.
It sounds to me like what you're really saying is the next time that you go to visit Anna Maria Island, you're going to be going to visit Anna Maria Island as it is, regardless of what the past history with the bench was.
Yes. It's just going to be going to see this island. I've been going to this thing since a kid. And so there's always going to have that attachment to it, but I'll probably enjoy it more because I'm not looking for something that can't be given by that island anymore.
Right.
And so that's just such a relief. And it's as we age and as we see things differently, and just sort of this is a more grown up view of like, wow, I've always been talking. I talk to everybody about their journey, the day-to-day stuff is what I love. I love the interaction with my people and my clients. I love my clients, and I have this incredible life, and I love that. So I pay a lot of attention to the journey, and I've never paid much attention to, the destination. I laughably say all the time, I'm going to die in my office or at the gym. That's the goal. I mean, it's going to be one of those two places, and I'm good if that happens. I'll be good with that. But because I love my life so much, I don't need a place to make it improve. But we'll place a narrative, and I think we all have it. And when I retire, we talked several episodes ago about the ikigai, the Japanese concept of the ikigai, about you find your purpose, you love it, you don't retire, you just keep going and going. And that's just this beautiful thing that I cannot love my life any more than I have right now. So I bring that with me. If I go down to, if I go out in my backyard, that can become the bench as well. That can become the bench. If I go anywhere, it's just, so it has the new ability that I bring the bench with me, or the theory of the bench is everywhere I go.
It's funny. You just used the phrase. Let's see. What was the phrase you used? Now, of course, it just blanked out of my head as soon as I try to say it. But the gist of the phrase was it was your it was your raison d'etre. It was the reason why you went to the bench, the reason why you go on these trips, and the reason why has become an internal thing. And as you were saying, whatever that phrase was, I can't remember what it was, but as you were saying that, I realized today I had a moment where I realized what my raison d'etre was, in a way that I hadn't, because we do think about it in terms of, well, what's my passion? What's my purpose? What's the thing that drives me along? And we think of what that thing is in terms of an activity, or it's a place to go, or a thing to acquire, or something like that. And today I realized my biggest raison d'etre is connection to people.
Yes.
It's one of the main reasons why I do this podcast. Why I don't know if you're aware of this. We're like within 5 episodes of number 2000. I mean, it's almost been 2000 episodes on this thing. And I look back, I mean, I've had people say, wow, I can't believe you did that. How did you pull that off? And I realize it's because I love connecting to people. That's what I get to do here. I get to connect with hundreds and hundreds of people over the years. And it feels wonderful. So what all that is coming out to is a purpose doesn't have to be a particular activity, doesn't have to be a particular place. It can be a feeling. My feeling is I like being connected.
Absolutely. And this is that journey, Walt, that you and we can get lost in what's lacking. We can get lost in the things that we perceive are lacking. And if I didn't, and this is going to come out really hard, and I'll debrief it. It'll come out backwards probably, but all the lack that I had that made me go through what I went through, all my loss, everything that happened, my lack actually drove me. And it put me in a position of, even the bad put me in a position for the good. Everything pushed me to this direction. And again, when you end up authentically doing what you absolutely love, when I was a child, I didn't know what I wanted to be or what I wanted to do. My dad owned an insurance agency, and that, didn't want to do that, but that's probably what I was going to sort of stuck me doing. And, the concept of life coaching was not a thing then. It just, the idea of being a therapist or something, I hated school. So that wasn't going to be a thing. So the idea that I would somehow fall into this was just a ludicrous thing. But yet I fall into the exact thing. I live at a point in life where, life coaching isn't that long of a career, so 2013, when I went into private practice, I don't think there was any other life coaches in Richmond, Virginia at the time. There may have been. I'm not aware of them. But yet for me to be able to just have that come along at that time, I just find it all fascinating. And again, I'm good at doing this. It's what I love to do. And I didn't even know that was a possibility. So my journey fulfilled itself by all the steps that I had to take. It's almost magically, as if it was all planned perfectly from the beginning. It all fell together perfectly.
There's a word that I've known for years, but I never really had a great application for it until the war of Ukraine came along, which is I won't even go into that part of the story, but it's a word that gets used there a lot. The word is culmination. And the way it gets defined in a war type situation is a culmination is where a particular campaign comes to its end, and then you look back to see what happened with the campaign.
Sure.
And when I thought about it that way, I thought to myself, well, that's really interesting. So all of these little goals that we're aiming at, those are our culmination points.
Yes.
And the journeys that get to them are, as we've been talking about, they're the most important part. The culmination is just kind of a place to sit back and take a look and see what the journey was like.
Yes.
And that's really all the culmination is. The culmination isn't actually the thing.
Right. Well, the pivot points, or whatever you want to call these points, culmination points or whatever, there's these standalone events that they could be benign, they could be fantastic, they could be horrible, but yet you don't realize they're directing you, they're pushing you toward that next thing. There's a movement toward, and it's like the chain of events that led me to where I'm at today, doing what I do the way I do, is really, it's just, how does me eating out of a trash can in 1988, being homeless in Las Vegas, have to do with today? And that was a pivotal moment. It was a horrible moment, but a pivotal moment that drastically altered my life, that I didn't even realize the connection to many, many, many years later. So
how could you? Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're going through it, it's like, how could I ever think, okay, I'm sitting by a dumpster. It's 117 degrees out in August. I'm homeless. I have no money. I have nowhere to reach out to. And I'm eating a burger out of that has maggots on the outside of the wrapper.
I'm repulsed already.
Yeah, and not as bad as I was, to be honest with you.
I'm sure. Yes, I was the one biting into it.
Yeah. So, but how could that event somehow be relevant and in some ways be life altering to get me to where I'm at today? That's what I'm fascinated about life, because again, to be born into the chaos I was born into, the absurdity I was born into, and all the mental health and all the stuff that I witnessed and had to go through as a child, I realized all that was a necessary thing for me to get to where I'm at. And I survived all that. I'm far stronger because of all that. And that is such an amazing, that's what I get fascinated about, that the journey itself is sort of the point. Is it not sort of? The journey itself is always the point. But once you get tuned into that, you can appreciate it. Like one of the things that's going on in my hometown, this is first day of school for us in my school district. Yeah. So everybody is posting first day pictures, right? And so there's people I know pretty well, like, but I don't see them regularly. So you see the kids picture, and it's like, in my mind, there's this one kid in particular. He used to do Taekwondo with Justin when Justin was 10. Well, Justin's 17. So I'm, this kid is going to be 7. The kid probably was 6 at the time. So he's 13 or 14, I guess. Well, in my mind, he's still a little teeny boy. Well, his mom put a picture of him. He's 5'6". He's 130 pounds. He's super tall. And I'm like, well, how did that happen? I mean, now I messaged his dad. I said, what happened? And he laughed and he goes, I was going to ask you the same thing about Justin. Justin, but when you realize all that's going on, and you get so stuck in the day to day to his father, the kid doesn't look like he changed much at all. He knows he has, but to me, it's this drastic leap forward because I haven't really seen him in several years. Right. And so that's the thing, that when you're on the journey, you tend to not enjoy or pay attention to the stuff that really is fascinating. And that's part of the lesson here at the bench is, just the journey. You're going to be fine wherever you're going to end up. It's going to be fine. Don't get any level, because I think my stress of it all, if you want to call it stress, was like, okay, I'm going to be moving down to a place I don't even like anymore. Why am I going to do that? And I was relieved of that being a thing. It's not a destination for me. It never needed to be. It was just I made that up.
Yeah, and you basically said, I'm done with that one. I don't need that one anymore. Yeah. And that's the essence right there. That's the essence of putting a block behind us.
Yes. Yeah. And so when you look at it, the law of attraction concepts of when you allow these things to go, you allow this journey to unfold. And I'm all about doing more stuff, pursue. It doesn't mean don't go pursue things. It's those are the things that, give it flavor. We're going to do some successful things, some unsuccessful things. We're going to learn new things. All that stuff's fantastic. But it's getting stuck on just one outcome, or just getting solely focused on, like you got to get your kids, to graduate, get to this. All those are important issues. But if you get so stuck on it, you forget to enjoy that thing. And also your kids are going off to their, in the senior year, they're going off to have their party, they're off to college, and you're going to see them occasionally from that point on.
It's a really great point. I mean, basically what we're saying is, are you paying attention to what you appreciate, or are you paying attention to what you don't like? And it's a great test, because that's talk about law of attraction. That's the essence of law of attraction. If you're paying attention to what you don't like, you're going to get more of what you don't like. And if you're paying attention to what you appreciate, you're going to get more of what you appreciate. It's really that straightforward. How interesting that we have to kind of talk ourselves into appreciating the thing that we appreciate.
Yeah, well, because there's a natural bias to protect. So you're looking out for the things you're scared of or you don't want. Yes. So you're almost always in tune of what could go wrong. We've talked about this a million times, different ways, and that bias toward that, you can get stuck in it. Like when you're saying, hey, I need to pay attention to today. on any given day, anything can happen. There's unlimited opportunities. We could die today. Anything can happen. Any event could happen today. And, sort of the power of now concept or living in the moment or any of that stuff, the law of attraction wants you to, that's what matters. The stuff you worry about. One of my clients from several years ago, I worked with this Wall Street firm, and this is a high-end trading firm, and they're clearing millions of trades a day. And I mean, there's one guy that was executing the trades on the floor of the stock exchange. If you ever understand what that is just an absurdly stressful concept.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's 35 years old, and he was making about $6 million a year.
Yeah.
And he was very excited because he told me on his 35th birthday, he said, Joel, I have $40 million saved up at 35. And I was like, yeah, but you're not going to make 40 at this rate. You're stressed. You're doing cocaine. You're doing, you had a very stressful lifestyle, and just all kind of partying. And just, I said, I'm glad you're making it. So one day before his 36th birthday, he had a stroke and died.
Oh my. Wow.
Yeah. And,
wow.
And yeah, he died with $40 million in the bank, and his, wife and kids are taken care of, but he never got to enjoy 1 second of all that. He worked for like 13 straight years, never taking a day off, hardcore doing that stuff. And it's like, you missed it. You missed it, buddy. You missed it.
I'm reminded. Sad. It is sad. It's very sad, but it's also a cautionary tale. And I'm reminded of an Abraham Hicks exchange. For those who are not familiar with Abraham Hicks, it's don't let it freak you out. It's just a very interesting way to understand life, the universe, and everything. And if you do know who Abraham Hicks is, well, I don't have to explain it to you. But anyway, Abraham is interacting with this person who's on the hot seat, as they call it. So someone who's asking questions for Abraham to answer. And the questioner is saying, I'm trying to get to this. My goal is I don't have this particular thing. They're describing what the thing is. I don't even remember what it was. It doesn't even matter. But they were describing this, I don't know, it was a career or if it was a person or whatever, something that they were wanting to get into their life. And I can't get it. I just don't have that. I don't know how to get there. And Abraham points out, well, you have there's this other thing that you were experiencing the same thing with, but you got to the point where you were able to get into vibrational alignment with it, and you were able to get this other thing. So tell us what it's like to have that other thing. And the person in the hot seat says, but Abraham, I already have that. I already know what that one's like. Yeah. Why do I need to go to that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think it's part of the reason why we don't appreciate what we would normally want to appreciate, because, well, I already have that.
Yeah, we already have it. And you when you value, you have great health. When you value, it sounds very cliche, but as you know, I sincere everything I say I do. I think a lot of people sometimes question whether I do what I say I do. I write 5 things I'm grateful for every day of my life since 1995. And have not missed a day. On the day my son died, I still wrote 5 things I'm grateful for. That's how serious I take this. So
wow.
Every day I write 5 things I'm grateful for. And the thing that just, as I've gotten older and I try to include this frequently, is I just woke up today. I mean, this isn't something that's afforded. I'm in perfect health. I have great health. I really don't have any worries. I don't have any stress. I wake and I'm grateful for all that, and I try not to ever take it for granted. Because I want to pay attention to what is right, and so much is right. And the more you focus on what's right, the seemingly things that aren't right, it just doesn't. It loses all weight. It's funny how insignificant they become when you're looking on what's right versus the lens of what's not perceived of what's not right.
What to me is really odd about that, because you're absolutely right. You're right about being right about that. But what's particularly odd to me about that is we can recognize that, but we will not take the time to actually put ourselves in that place, and so we don't get the benefit of it.
Right. And that's the thing. You to get where you're at, where you like this morning, since I returned from the bench, and I was able to. As you know, I'm in the gym every morning. I go to the gym this morning, had a great workout. I'm talking to all the people there, and I'm thinking, wow, I'm living the exact life I'm choosing to live. I'm doing exactly what I want to do. I work from home today. I didn't go into my office. I had 6 sessions, and I did them from. It just worked out that way. Some days my virtual sessions line up so I can do it
Sure.
from home. And I'm like I'm able to. I'm just able to have this career that I love. I'm able to do these things, and I schedule my gym. I'm able to get the stuff I want to get, and I remind myself of that every day because it's just we can quickly flee into what's not right, and then that's how that is the law of attraction in either direction. But you what you're feeling is what you're inviting. And when I'm constantly reminding myself of I have all of the stuff where I want it to be, I spent a lifetime getting it to where it is. And I don't ever want to forget what took it to get here, not to wallow in the bad thing, but to remind myself of here I am. And I want to keep focusing on that. And I will continue to have this as long as I don't lose track of what I have.
That's actually a form of appreciating the contrast, isn't it? The
Yes.
contrast
Yes.
being on the one hand, we have these things that happen that we don't like, and on the other hand, we have these things that happen that we do like. And very, very, very often, well, actually, I would say probably all the time, in order for us to really go after or really want something that we do like, we have to experience what we don't like, the flip side of it first. Like, oh,
Yes.
I really don't like having no money, so I need to go get some money. It's that kind of a thing. You know, you need to
Yes.
experience the negative in order to know the positive. And then once you get through to the point where, okay, the money's there, I don't have to worry about the money anymore. Now you can look back on that contrast. You can say, wow, that contrast was powerful. On the one hand, I was so focused on the negative, I end up with negative, got 0 results out of it. Finally, at some point, I made the shift to the positive. Money started to show up. Wow, that really shows me how powerful that contrast is. I appreciate that contrast. That's basically the story you've been telling us all throughout the show here.
Yeah, and the contrast is necessary. It for me it was. I can only speak to my reality. I don't have today what I have without going through what I went through. So the contrast was a necessary thing for me to even understand how to do all this. It was to grow up again with a lot of mental health and a lot of addiction issues, and to go become a compulsive gambler myself, create the chaos I created. All that stuff, some of that almost didn't even seem survivable. I almost didn't survive some of it, but yet I did.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not minimalizing what I went through, but that's the building blocks of my life today were built on the contrast of those events back then. Contrast for me was a necessary component to get here. I don't appreciate what I have right now without knowing what it took to get this. And and that's another thing when I'm working with families of wealth. A lot of times they don't even remotely understand the contrast. They don't have the value of contrast. They don't have the value of poverty. They don't have the value of that stress and anxiety over financial issues. They don't, and again, I view it that way because I had all those things, and they don't. And so they take it for granted. They're miserable. I have true story. I've shared this on the show before. I have a family that siblings. They're about 2 miles apart on Palm Beach, and they both have oceanfront mansions. One's 10,000 square feet, 10,600 square feet. The other is the brother's is 10,200 square feet, and he is furious. He is absolutely furious. His sister's is 400 more square feet. Seriously.
I believe you. I can't help but laugh at them because from somebody sitting outside, it's laughable.
And the problem is the way they're built and with the restrictions that he can't figure out how to get 400. But it literally weighs on him. He has these incredible views over the Atlantic Ocean, and I find it, and it's very real to him.
I'm sure it is.
Him.
Yeah.
And it is like and I just get to a place where, he all he has is understanding his sister has a little more, and of course his house in Vail is bigger than hers, but we won't talk about that.
Of course not. Yeah, that one's already touched. I've already got her beat on that one. I don't need to focus on that one.
Yeah. So, but we can get, and that's an absurd example, but we can get tripped up on those things. Oh, yeah. And you can focus on what you don't have or what you do have or what you perceive. But when you can just live within what you have and really appreciate, whatever you can find to appreciate, you're just going to simply attract more things to appreciate. if you're going to look at things to bitch and moan about and complain about, the same is true. You're going to attract more of those.
I want to tell as much as I can. I can't tell much about this story. I don't have permission to tell it, so I can only be very cursory about it. It's from a good friend of mine, something that she's been going through at work, and without going into the details of it, the gist of the problem is she has a coworker who she feels like has been mistreating her over and over and over and over again, and she's been railing on to me, to other friends, about how this person just keeps sending her all these terrible emails and so forth. Well, got a text message from her. I had a conversation with her over the weekend and made a suggestion to her. I said, why don't you, I understand all that you're dealing with, and she was actually laying out plans for how she was going to handle it with the boss and all that kind of thing. I said, let me suggest one other thing to you. Why don't you just sit with it and just make sure, kind of ask yourself, is there any way that I could have been contributing to this? Just make sure you get that part out of the way so that you can relax and feel good about yourself on this one. She says, okay, I'll do that. She texted me today. She said, it was all about me. I said, whoa.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like blown away. I didn't expect that result. This was not me being, clairvoyant and saying, wow, this is going to be this really brilliant question I'm asking her. That's not what it was at all. I was very surprised by the result, but she did it. And the reason I mention that is you take the time to actually sit down and have an honest conversation with yourself about whatever the thing is. It doesn't matter what it is. Whatever the thing is that's driving you nuts about, 400 square feet less than your sister or whatever. If you can really sit down with yourself on that one, you can actually get to the truth of the matter by yourself. You actually can. I mean, it's always helpful to have a life coach or a therapist or a friend or a counselor to help you get there, but you can do it yourself too. She did it.
Yes. And that perspective helps. I mean, I've actually physically, to make a point, I do this a lot, especially with some of my younger clients that need the visual of this. So they'll come in with a similar situation. Let's say they have a dilemma. So I will get up and change chairs with them. I will have them sit in my chair and I'll sit in their chair. And I will have them, I'll reverse roles. I will say,
I love it.
And it's an amazing technique by, what is your role? Just by changing a perspective, just like you did, it becomes a lot easier. And you don't have to literally physically get up out of the chair, but like you're asking her to do, to review, before you go with that, whatever you're going to do, let's do a quick inventory to see what role you played in this. And when she's able to see that role, she's able to oh my gosh. So you got her to sort of metaphorically sit across from herself and evaluate that. That's good.
Yeah. And it's a kind of a rare thing because I don't think most people end up doing that most of the time. I just find it very reassuring to know that you can do it yourself. You have to be honest with yourself on a level that's not comfortable. I'm sure that was not a comfortable conversation she had with herself. I know some of the details about what that conversation were, and it wasn't comfortable. I know for a fact that it wasn't. Right. But look what she got out of it, though.
It changes everything. When and one of the things I try to do is be brutally honest with myself. And very few things bother me anymore. So I don't. This is going back in time a lot, but what I would always want to ask that question: what my role is in something? What is my role? And it is not always right. Sometimes it's always based on what my perceptions are. And I always try to evaluate that. And it doesn't matter. And then I ultimately I ask myself every day on anything that's bothering me, the last question I ask, is this thing that's bothering me in any way in my control? And if it is, let me get busy on working on it instead of worrying about it. And if it isn't, what am I going to do with that?
Yeah. This is the essence of personal growth.
Yes.
People talk about growing themselves or improving. This is the essence of it. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is where you're actually doing it.
Yes, and so that's that. So this last visit to Florida was amazing, Walt, in a different way than it's ever been, and reminding me in a way that I've never been reminded personally that it's all about the journey. There isn't the journey is where this has always been about. The spoiler alert, it is the journey. There is there's not going to be a twist in it. The journey was it the entire time. And that's what you're here for. You're here for that. You're here for the journey. And, and that just makes life so much more exciting when tomorrow, when I get up, I'm on a new leg of the journey. I'm on another leg of the journey tomorrow. And it's just, I have no idea what happens. It's still unfolding. That's exciting to me.
By the way, it's also reassuring to know that, I mean, your story was one of, well, I went to the bench because I always go to the bench, and I hadn't had any real insight in the last few years, but I was hoping for something, and I got this great insight. And it's not a high drama story. It's a low drama story.
Yes.
And we were just talking a moment ago about the contrast, and we very often are very dramatic in our lives. We create all this massive contrast, but I love this story because it also is a reminder we don't have to have high levels of drama in order to learn from the contrast. It can be very low levels. We just have to be willing to look for the information. We have to be willing to actually dig in and see where the low level thing is actually showing us something.
Yes. My son walked into the door and he backed out as soon as he saw me on the podcast. So I was going to tell him to say hi, but he left. But my life is low drama right now. There were times where they were dramatic. I mean, my first sitting on the bench, it literally, am I going to kill myself or I'm going to make a decision to move forward? That's pretty dramatic. That was as high as drama as it gets.
Right.
This is not it. This wasn't dramatic on any level. This was simply me figuring out, wait a minute, let me just take a deep breath and realize what is left for there to be learned here. What's left?
So I think we can fairly say that there was some contrast. It was very low level contrast.
Yes.
And what makes the whole story so cool is that you tapped into low level contrast. Like you said, you don't have a lot of drama in your life. You don't need the drama. You're really so used to just tapping into what you're dealing with right now, no matter how minor it can be, no matter how low key it can be, you can still tap into it and you can learn from it. You can gain benefit from it. That to me, that's the mark of the advanced soul. That's because the person who doesn't need to have the big contrast in order to get the breakthroughs, that's the person who's really become a master of his own life.
And also being one of the most helpful tools, and I don't even know if they still call it this because they changed, but the emotional guidance scale that you mentioned, Abraham Hicks earlier, and the old emotional guidance scale that they talked about in the law of attraction, where you literally, when you realize your emotions are just simply a tool to say where you're at, they're not good or bad. They're just, so when I realized I'm not understanding why I'm feeling this way, I'm on the island and it's not the same feeling. So I was able to see the emotions weren't the same. The emotions were not matching my anticipation. And so I used that part to eventually help me point out the contrast. So it's one of the tools when you realize, why am I here and this isn't feeling this way to me? And as I started telling the story, it sounded like I was complaining about the Florida and complaining about all that. No, it was just the reality where it was at. It was not neither good nor bad. It was just it led
different.
me to that. It was different, and that's what I love about my life now. I'm not sitting on the bench deciding, am I going to survive or not survive? I'm sitting on the bench trying to just sort of take that low key stuff and be able to, and in a much different way. Clearly that the answer at the bench in 1995 was very dramatic and it saved my life and all that led to it. So, but in this way, this is just a different kind of relief. It's just sort of wait a minute, you're stuck on a destination that really has no point of being stuck on. There's no point to that destination anymore.
And once again, we're talking about the importance and the value of the journey. And yeah, I remember the first time I got presented with that idea. I remember how I felt. I don't remember what the actual incident was, but I remember how I felt the first time I heard that idea. And the way I felt was jarred. I felt like, well, that can't be true. That must be an aberration. We'll just skip that part. We'll come back to that one later on. But
yes,
over time, I've come to realize, wow, it really is the journey in ways that I never expected.
Yeah, the journey. All the excitement is in the journey. All the pain's in the journey. Everything that matters is in the journey. And the destination is when the journey comes to an end. That's the only real destination. And I see, and I'm not in judgment of anyone, whatever people perceive, but you go work at the post office for 50 years or 40 years or however long, then you go get your $5,000 a month, and you sit on the golf course and play, and that works. That's some people's. I'm on board. Let's go do that. But to me, that's like, okay, did I do all that for that? I mean, I just view it differently. And everybody's got to find their own thing. When you wake up, if one of the things that I can instill in Justin, and he's a pretty philosophical kid, but I try to point out this is the journey. He has an incredible journey. He's going to be able to tell his story too at some point. His journey has been pretty amazing. But when you live in that journey and you there's no anxiety in the journey. There's no depression in the journey. The journey is fearful of the destination, the future that is where depression and anxiety exist. Because the journey is simply right now. And the journey is like, let's just see what happens with this. It's almost like, wow, I can't wait to see what happens tomorrow.
Yeah, it's like watching your own movie.
Yes. Yeah, it really is. It's fantastic.
Well, one thing I can tell you is I'm so glad that your journey and my journey came back into a common journey again, because we had that for many years, and I missed it when it was gone. I really did miss it. I know you did too. We both did. It was just schedules didn't work, but I'm so glad we got the schedules lined up now so that we can actually do this, because I love being part of this journey. This is fun.
Well, yeah, I really do. And I would have come live from the bench, but my signal was not strong enough to support this platform.
Well, we tried,
so,
you know.
Yeah, it wouldn't have worked, but it was a spectacular trip in a different way than it's ever been. And again, part of the synchronicity between us is I mean, obviously this week I'm just slam busy with all the stuff I have to do.
Sure.
To make up for last week, but you came up with the topic of the report from the bench, and that's literally what I was going to say. I made a discovery at the bench, but it's not what you think.
Right. We just discovered that the bench isn't the important thing. Oh my God.
Yeah. Wait a minute. Forget the bench. It doesn't matter.
Forget the bench. So does this mean there's going to be another book? The next book's going to be the anti-bench, or what the real bench is, or the bench in your mind, or something like that?
Lord, well, I mean, I'm still working on book number 2, by the way. So,
right, this is true. Yes, but that's been ongoing.
One of my future books. Yeah,
right.
Well, I think I told you my problem isn't lack of content.
That's right. Yeah. Your problem is too much.
Way too much content. So what I'm trying to, I have an editor right now that's trying to help me get this into one book. And,
cool.
So he said, you probably have 6 books here. And I go, we just got to put the categories into the books. So, but I have way too much content for one book. It would be way bigger than any, War and Peace has nothing on this book as it exists now.
So we'll just call it the Encyclopedia of the Law of Action. That's what it is.
Yeah. It's like, wow, it's just way too much. So I will get on that, but it is in the works. But really, again, I'm very grateful for what we do. I'm grateful for to be able to sort of share this, because it's every week we seem to come up with a topic. Some are better than others, but every week I get something out of it, whether there's a soul listening or not. I enjoy this. It's a reinforcement of our friendship and something that we built over the years. And 2,000 shows coming up for you is just a mind-numbing number. That's fantastic.
It is. People ask me how you do it, and I say, I have no idea. One at a time. That's the best I can tell you.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot of shows, and it's one of those things that you just do, and it isn't like we make a lot of money or any money doing this. It's simply something it's just what we bring to the table. It's part of our passion. And, I'm not saying we arrived at the same place in the law of attraction, but when we first started, you and I were still learning quite a bit.
Yeah. Which is odd, because I brought you on as the expert, but it's true. I mean, you were teaching me as fast as you were learning it, basically.
Yeah. I mean, we were learning and growing, and then the life kept happening, and things kept, going forward. And it was just like, so in a weird way, we were able to sort of track this incredible journey. And it just, so I'm really pleased with where you're at, where the show's at, where you're at personally. And I continue to value doing this. It's really awesome.
I can think of one thing that is different between now and then. Then we had maybe 20 people listening. Now we have a few hundred people listening. It's a big difference. And so
yes,
I just wanted to also take a moment to say thank you to those of you who've been listening. We love you. Thank you for participating. Thank you for showing up. You just add gravy on top. You're the cherry on top with the whipped cream. I love it so much. So thank you, Joel. Thank you, podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.